Hi, Team Flyer. Welcome here to another beautiful Wednesday over here at the Always Believer podcast. I'm very excited. I'm giddy. I don't know. I'm so excited for today's guest. She's like laughing in the background. It's so funny though. I saw her on TikTok because that's something that I do with my life. I went way back in the day when it was Musically because of my girls. That's a whole different side story. But anyways, I saw her on TikTok and I fell in love with her baby twins. They're boys and they're freaking adorable. And I don't know, I just reached out and say, hey, I love your videos. I love your stuff. We started talking. We connected through Instagram and one thing led to another. And she told me about her really interesting birth story and really talk a little bit about PPD and so on and so forth. So without further ado, this bubbly, creative, one heck of a super mom, Lacey.
Hi. You're too sweet. You're way too sweet.
Oh, honey, like your story, you're like, okay. Oh, by the way, Team Flyer, she's also on today's post. So if you go hop on thealwaysbeliever.com, she has a blog post written by her, of course, sharing her story. And it's the same one that she submitted. I just added the pretty pictures of you and that's all I did. But like that story was just
Yeah.
a roller coaster of emotions.
It was a
And
roller
you,
coaster of emotions for me.
yeah, of course. Of course. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your me time, the hour me time you have away from your twins, sharing it here with
Every
us.
mother needs it. Every mother needs it. I stand by that.
Yes. Not only because you have twins, just in general. One is already enough. Two is, well, more than it's crazy. Thank you for being here. Like I said, thank
Thank
you
you for
for,
having me.
you're welcome. Thank you for sharing your story, for being brave enough to share your story, and for being part of course, our movement Go to Fly, for being that always believer, because you have a different kind of story than I do, of course. And you're happy to reach out to people who have going through the same thing, who have gone through the same thing, and that perspective. So thank you once again very much.
Of course.
Let's get rolling over here.
All
So
right.
tell us, before you dive into your story, a little bit about you and where
Okay.
you're from and what you do, and
So obviously, I'm Lacey. I grew up in the South a little bit, I would say, but I moved to the Las Vegas area when I was 12 years old. And that's where I did like a lot of my majority growing up, because it was kind of like, your hardcore middle school years, and then definitely straight into high school and into college. So that to me was like my most growing up, I would say, um, from teenage to adulthood. And that was actually where I met my husband. But we didn't connect until after school, which was very interesting because we went to school the whole time.
did
We
you
just
know each
didn't.
other in school? Like, did you talk and
We
whatnot?
did, we did, but I was actually really, really good friends with his brother. So it was strange. So I knew his family, but didn't know really him. We dated different people and kind of had similar crowds, but not similar crowds. It was interesting, to say the least. But somehow we full circled our way back to each other, and then
It's
now
meant
here
to
we
be.
are.
I
9 years later,
share,
married.
yeah.
I mean, who knew that that would work out? but but yeah, so that happened, and I got married about 20 years old. Definitely a lot younger than I ever anticipated for myself. I was definitely very independent growing up and did not expect that to happen, but I'm obviously very happy about it. Um, but we got married, and then we immediately my husband joined the Air Force. So that was kind of his initiation to go ahead and start, I'm going to take care of this family kind of a thing. And
Mhm.
so immediately he started, and our first assignment was all the way in Tampa, Florida. So we had a huge move to Florida, and we loved it. We absolutely loved it. It was just the two of us. We did a lot of our, I don't know, it was kind of like our honeymoon stage, and so it was
Yeah,
exciting.
exactly.
It was
Those like
great.
newlywed stuff, definitely.
Yes, yes, we were super exciting, and we just enjoyed the time that we had with each other. We got a dog, I mean, that was
Ooh.
kind of the jump start to our marriage. Um, Not long after that, though, we weren't in Tampa for very long, just a couple years, And he came home one day and told me, I have some news. We're moving to Japan. And
Japan, like out of all the
Japan,
places in the world,
I
Japan.
know, not
Which
Virginia, not, it's like, we're going to Japan.
like not even Hawaii, which is a kind of sort of far. Depends where you live in
Right.
the States. You know what I mean? No.
Exactly, exactly. So I
Yeah.
was, I mean, a part of me had always wanted to go because I was that kid. I mean, when I was 16, I had a Japanese styled birthday party. So, I mean, if that tells you anything.
Oh, yes, it tells a lot because it's not like not when I was 6, when I was 16. I was very conscious of what I was doing. That's
Exactly.
amazing though. Like I feel like it's a perfect opportunity. I mean, for that, well, for first of all, for what he does for our country, of course, and what he's, obviously. But as a, I traveled around the world so much and I love the fact that, they're like, it's Japan. It's such a whole different contrast. And
It really is. And that was it was exciting but super scary all at the same time. We just were like, I don't know, how do you just embrace a whole brand new culture like that, you know? So that
just
was,
yes.
you
That's
just
my life
indulge.
story. So you just go for it.
Exactly, exactly, which is exactly the approach we took because there was nothing else we could really do with that. But we immediately jumped into it and we're just, okay, well, we'll do this. And not even, I think it was about 4 months later, we were overseas. And I mean, that was probably the most eye-opening 4 years of my life, but also the best in so many ways that I didn't know at the time. But looking back, I'm just like, it's so nostalgic for me because it
Oh.
really is. And it's one of those moments where I didn't know what I had till I don't have it anymore, And if someone gave me all the money in the world and told me you could go live back there with, and I'll take care of everything, I would have, okay. Like
It's like, sure, there you
there
go.
would be
Yes.
no question in my mind. I miss it so much. It's I can strongly say that it's literally a second home for me.
Oh,
It's
that's a
just
beautiful statement to have, especially you lived there for 4 years.
4 years.
Wow, that's still
And
that's a big chunk, especially at that age, especially growing up, because that's what
oh,
happened to me with a lot of different things, of course, in different ways. That's how what I feel like with Barcelona. I moved there
oh,
for
sounds
my own,
beautiful.
like that's where a place that I always wanted to live in. And because I lived in
Mhm.
Spain for a very long time, but I lived in different places of Spain, different places of Europe, and I was like, no, I really want Barcelona. And I lived there for 6 years, and it's a home away from home. And it is that feeling that you're like, it was just so magical.
It
And
is.
and Japan's actually one of the top things on our list. Out of all the places that me and my husband ever talk about, the top 3 places, Japan is one of them because it's
You can get
Japan.
there, get there. Oh
Like,
man.
we are still very open for adventures. I'm so happy that I happen to marry someone who loves adventure as much as I do, of course. Because like, why not? Why we're young, we can do it, we can live our life. Let's go to Japan.
Exactly. Exactly. You got to do it.
Exactly. Oh my god, I have to like tell you, like not tell you, sorry, ask you a million things after the podcast, obviously, about Japan, or a different episode all about Japan, actually, probably, but still. So,
So, mhm.
stuff happened in Japan.
Yes.
Really good things, of course, happen in Japan
Yes.
because it's just a wonderful thing and place for you to be in general.
Mhm.
And you also decided to start a family.
Yes. So basically, right before we left for Japan, we kind of were having the talk that we were ready to start having children. I had been on birth control, pretty much from the time I was about 15. I have really bad endometriosis.
Mm,
So that's kind of where it all started. It was the whole approach where I wasn't necessarily in the place to need the birth control, because I wasn't being
ex-
active, but
active, but
it was for pain control,
yeah, I feel like that's something else a lot of
regulation.
people need to know. People think like, "Oh, you're taking it
Yes.
because you're active." I'm like, "No, it's
It's
just
not
because you it's not only the only that's not the only reason
exactly.
because I've also taken
Exactly.
it when I wasn't active myself for my own thing because it was like spotting and for excuse me for it to TMI, but it happens. Like it's not a taboo subject.
No,
It's
of
kind of like
course.
this is something that we go through.
Of course, of course. And it is. It's something and I feel that a lot of younger women or girls in general at that time, they get kind of a bad rep about that because it isn't always that. There's definitely a case by case situation because everybody has their own scenario they're going through and situation.
Exactly.
But so I had been on it for years, and so we were I was 23 when we were moving to Japan. And so I was finally like, okay, I mean, I can try, that's fine. And, but we started trying, nothing was working. And we were like, okay, well, by that time it had been about 9 months to a year once we got over to Japan, and we finally decided to seek out with our doctors, like, okay, these aren't working. Are we doing something wrong? Like, like, what do I need to be doing? But newsflash, you're not doing anything wrong.
Exactly. Usually it's not you, it's just your body,
Yes,
which
if you feel like you're doing something wrong, it is not you doing it. It's not the act of you doing
exactly.
it.
It's like we know you're trying.
Exactly. So basically, we sought out help, and they pretty much told us, unfortunately, that there wasn't much for us to do other than they could do a couple tests, run some, lab work, and we'll see if anything shows up. But it wasn't like a quick fix type thing. So we were, we explored that. Um, we later found out that I was diagnosed with, if you can even say that, but I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility, and I'm saying this in quotation marks because it makes no sense, and that's the term, I guess, that they use when they just go, "Well, we don't know." So so I
So
was
we have to label it something because we're
yeah,
doctors and
we
we
have to
should
put
know, but we don't know.
right, this is what we're gonna write on paper, I don't, and it was
Surreal.
very it was very surreal. It was, and it was super eye-opening because we just were like, I don't I I don't understand how you can't tell me what's wrong, but it pushed us in a direction that was we needed though. So once we found out about that, we moved forward with try to figuring out what our options were. So we realized we were going to need some medical help if we were going to have kids, or if we were just, going to opt for adoption or anything else, which we were always, always, always open to.
Hmm.
That was never anything out of our mind. We were 100% for that if it came down to it. But I feel like at some point there are a lot of people do still want that piece of them to kind of pass on to. So,
I agree. I'm always big on adoption. I had a really
oh
hard
yes.
upbringing, so I thoroughly, at some point of my life, I became a foster mom as well.
Oh, wow.
And for me, it's super important. I always loved the idea of adoption. I always thought like, oh, I won't have kids, I'll just adopt. But at some point, especially with
Yes.
my husband and who I happen to marry, has that also idea of not only adoption, but also like what you said, carrying something that's your own
Yes.
in that kind of way. So I
Yes.
agree with what you're saying. Like for me, it took me a long time to actually change. I went from like just being just adopting to now be like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, we can do
Ex
both.
exactly, exactly, and that was something that we were trying to explore for ourselves too, because we didn't know if obviously having kids for ourselves was going to be an option, but it was always something we were partly wanting though.
Exactly. So you want to explore like all the ways and all the feels
Exactly.
before you
So,
move on to the next thing, which
oh,
is still a
100.
really decent way to move on because adoption is good, of course, but you want to make sure that, you covered all the single doors that were open.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And I feel like that there's no shame in exploration. I mean,
Oh
if
gosh, no, no, not at
yeah, you
all.
never
It's
have
your
to.
life at the end of the day, and it's something that you and your
Right,
husband decided. So I mean, it's
right.
you do you.
Exactly, and everybody should do that. But so that's kind of the direction we started taking, where what are our options? And so we being in Japan, it gave us a lot more options than we realized we had. I'm not sure how much people are aware of this. It is a known fact, but obviously it's not a very known fact if it's not something you're specifically going through. But finding out we were infertile, we obviously started looking at, okay, how much is this going to cost us? And the United States infertility treatments are outrageous. I mean, absolutely outrageous. I mean, as are adoption um, fees. I mean, all of that stuff is outrageous, and I will honestly never really understand that. That's completely out of my forte.
You and me
um,
both about how adopting a child or having a child and you're doing something useful and beautiful,
right.
so
It
expensive.
it is. They really make you work for it, and
Exactly.
and in a lot of ways it's so discouraging because I don't, because there's so many people who can't afford this stuff. And honestly, so I started to get discouraged because I mean, my husband and I, obviously we were doing okay for ourselves, but by no means were we rich. And just had money to throw at something that we didn't even know if would work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started looking at our options in Japan instead of the US, and it's it was amazing. We found a fertility clinic, and Japan takes a totally different approach on women and just couples in general wanting to have children. And we found out it was 100% affordable for us because our insurance didn't cover any of it, because that's another thing about fertility. I mean, insurances don't want to touch it. I'm not 100% sure why, but to me, it really feels like it's something just because it's such an unpredictable, case that I don't know how much insurances want to, okay, well, we'll just give you this money, and but you're going to need it again and again in the end because it's probably not going to work the first time. And, so insurances 9 times out of 10 are like, I'm not, that's not for us, sorry. And so unfortunately we were in that boat. And so everything was out of pocket for us. But in Japan, it was, something that was tens of thousands of dollars in the US came down to a mere 5,000 at the most. I mean, and that was with multiple treatments. I mean, we were floored that we were even able to have that kind of opportunity there. And so that's what I was saying, like when I said earlier that it was one of the best and most eye-opening moments for me being in
Mm-hmm.
Japan. I just didn't even know that that world existed. And so being there and going through that situation, didn't even know I was going to need that at the time. It's strange how you're like in right place, right time.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, you're there for a reason. You were there at that moment of your life, and that, like, that storyline that you were explaining, like from like getting married at 20 and then trying at
Mhm.
23, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Japan. You would think like life is going to be a way more hectic. It's going to be more difficult over there, but no, it's actually helping you because it's there for you. It
Exactly.
was
And
like
that
that was
was
your answer.
exactly. And that was the crazy part about it all, is that it's just so you don't expect any of that, but it was like all the pieces were kind of lining up. And but but as amazing as it was, it obviously didn't work the first time. I mean, I think people who are infertile and going through fertility treatments kind of weirdly expect that. you know, it was something to give a quick rundown, because it was a few years. We didn't get pregnant until our last 6 months in Japan. So if that gives you an idea of the timeline.
Exactly.
So it was a few years in the making. But we did 3 IUIs, which are the artificial insemination, and then 3 treatments of IVF. So, which is the actual where they take the egg, take the sperm, and meet them together, and then inseminate. So it's like, that those were the different, and then obviously in between them, there were times where I got pregnant, and then times where it just didn't work. Obviously, during the times that I got pregnant were miscarriages, and you have to wait a good 4 to 6 months, depending on the case and how far along. And I mean, it's a whole it's a whole structure in and of itself. um, but yes, we got pregnant finally, and the times that it actually stuck and actually worked, we get twins. And what
which
are the
also
odds?
which also tends to happen.
It does.
From not having a possibility at all to twins or triplets or more.
I
But usually it's either twin or triplets from what I see.
Which is crazy, because before that it was just one, and then we finally were like, fine, we'll just do two. We'll just do it. And then I was like, why did we decide that?
It's like, why do we want to have two all of a sudden? Like, I love them both dearly, but oh my gosh, they're two. There's two little
Well,
babies right
and it's
here.
one of those things where you just don't expect. You're like, not one worked. Why would two? I mean, if we put two, it gives us more of an odd for one to stick, right? So,
Exactly. No. There you go. They needed to come together. Oh, your boys,
eh,
I swear, are so cute. So cute.
I wouldn't give them up for anything. I really
Of
wouldn't.
course.
They've changed my life in such an amazing, beautiful way.
um Yeah, so at some point when I was reading your story and I was reading this
Mm,
part of your story, this was like the whole roller coaster, like you said, because like I said, because of what you went through. It was,
yes.
third time's a charm, and you happen to have
Yes.
boys. I mean twins.
Yes.
Well, of course boys, but twins. But before then, you were really open about your miscarriage, you were open
Yes.
about what you felt, and you're again gonna be more open a little later about what happened after the pregnancy as well.
Yes. So
So
base mhm.
sorry for
No, 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 no,
interrupting.
no,
So
go ahead. Yes.
the miscarriage,
Yes.
or well both sadly, how did that affect you going through? Were you still like saying, okay, we're gonna continue, we're gonna keep working for it, we want it, try one more time?
I think all those emotions, honestly. I think I
Mm.
felt the f- the miscarriage was the biggest one I had. I had a few in between, but they were very minor, and it was kind of in my own private moments that those happened. But there was one in particular where I had to have an actual D&C because I was about 12 weeks along. So my body wasn't extracting and miscarrying the way that it was supposed to biologically do. So yes, I ultimately ended up having to have a D&C, and that was a moment where being in Japan was difficult for me because here I am, a country, a whole ocean, a whole world away from everybody I know, and excuse me, and my family, and my husband unfortunately actually had to work that day. And for people who don't know what he does, he is a firefighter, and so I mean, he's a whole person on a truck, and so it's kind of like you can't just kind of get the day off. It doesn't work when you're working in like an office building, unfortunately. Um, and I understood that. Obviously, I mean, that's the life we live. That's nothing new to me. So that wasn't anything that I didn't expect, but I luckily had a really great friend at work that dropped me off at the hospital and picked me up and things like that. But it was in the few moments before I actually went back there, I genuinely had all the feelings where I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. This is it. I mean, this one was supposed to work. We had already told our families about it. We didn't likely post anything about it online or social media, but it was still, you know, this was supposed to be the one, and it's not working. And why am I even doing this? Why are we spending money on something that's not working? I mean, I had all those emotions. I was angry, I was crying because I was depressed, and I'm in the hospital bed by myself. I mean, I mean, that was I would probably say that was when a lot of my, I guess, unnoticed is the best word I can say, unnoticed depression started setting in. um uh, the whole fertility roller coaster really is just, it's a roller coaster. There's so much that you feel throughout the whole thing because you try to stay hopeful and you try to stay positive, and in a lot of ways it kind of feels like you're getting pushed down every time. You're like, it's going to be okay, I'm going to try this again. Oh no, it's not working, I'm going to try it again. Oh no, I mean, it's just an up and down constant movement that it's hard not to get into this thing about like, why is my body not doing the one thing it's supposed to biologically do on this earth? You know what I mean? It's a strange feeling to really feel. But for me, I would say that that was the moment a lot of things started happening, but I didn't really know it was happening. Um, Not long after that, we obviously I had another, I had to wait a couple months after the DNC, and then we decided to go for our second round. That was our first round of IVF, by the way. And so we started to go for our second round of IVF, and I got pregnant again. This was in November of 2017. And when I got pregnant, I was probably about 4 weeks, so not super far along. But I got a call from my mother about my grandfather getting ready to pass away. He had been battling brain cancer
Hmm.
for years, and this was like his sixth cancer. I mean, it was, it, his whole story is a whole nother story.
Exactly. That's
I mean, but long story short with him, he was such a huge father figure in my life. And when my mother called and was like, Lacey, this I think this is it. I mean, I immediately I talked to my husband. I was like, I gotta go.
You
I gotta go.
gotta
I've got to
go,
be
of
there.
course.
And so I probably a couple days later, I jumped on an airplane, flew 24 hours, travel, got all the way down to Alabama, which is where he was, and I stayed for 3 weeks to a month while he was on hospice. And then I obviously stayed and helped my grandmother and my mother go through all the funeral situations and all that. And then during that time, it was so stressful, obviously, given the circumstance, and so emotional. I ended up miscarrying while I was there. I didn't tell my family or anything because that was, to me, that was the last thing they needed to hear.
Of
you know
course.
with the situation being what it was, I mean, I 100% didn't want to add any more on top of anybody. And it was strange for me because honestly, when I did miscarry that second time, didn't I didn't really feel anything, uh, emotionally speaking. I mean, obviously there was, physical pain,
T-
but but I really felt numb. And I think a lot of that was, one, I still in a lot of ways felt like I was still emotionally healing from the last
The last one,
miscarriage.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, and then on the other part, I was trying to emotionally deal with what was going on with my grandpa, and I was literally watching him die. And so it was like, I think I just didn't know how to feel, and so I didn't, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. It does make sense because, well, of course, because everything you just said, as in
Yeah.
like it's a previous one as well. You weren't
Yeah.
as far along with this one. It wasn't like you need to go to the doctors like the first one as well, or
Right,
like have a medical
right,
situation. But of course, your focus was your family, like your
right.
grandpa and what they were going through. So it's absolutely normal.
Yeah, and I think that was in a weird way. I don't think I expected it to work either, just because of I knew I was immediately flying as soon as I found out, and I
Yeah, I
think I
feel like
kind of disconnected already in a strange way.
you just feel.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a feeling that you feel, whatever it is, and it's kind of strange to like put in a
yeah.
sentence, but it's something that it's a gut feeling at the end of the day.
It
You're
is, it
like,
is. No, exactly, it is, and it's such a weird thing to try to explain because I'm
yeah,
like, I don't.
like
In the moment, I didn't know anything was going on. I just kind of, and it's not. I mean, I can think back on it now and kind of laugh about it because I've grown so much from where I was in that
which is
moment.
beautiful. Like it's beautiful
Thank
that you
you,
see that process and see that change that you
thank
can get
you.
out of everything that had
You
come your
can,
way. You
you
can.
100% can, even when you genuinely don't feel anything. You really can, and so honestly, from that moment though, I mean, as soon as I got back after I went back to Japan in January of 2018 after everything happened, and I decided I was just going to take time and do me for a little while, enjoy myself. I was dealing with another miscarriage, dealing with my passing of my grandfather. I was like, okay, I'm going to just do the things that I want to do while I can do them, and I'm not going to let anything stop it for this moment. And so, while I was in Japan, I met one of my best friends, and shout out to Robin because I'm sure she's going to listen. I love you.
Hi, Robin.
But basically, we decided we were going to. I had been to. So fun fact, I love Disney. Absolutely, absolutely love Disney.
That's something else you and me have in common because all the people who have followed me for a while or 2 days, they know I'm Disney 110%. I'm actually wearing a Beauty and the Beast, what's it called, sweater and a Toy Story t-shirt. And
Okay,
anything you're going to see in the background is like Disney and Mickey and Minnie. So yes to
well,
this 110% Dis.
I'm wearing a
Oh my
Goofy
God, I
movie
was I was about to wear the same t-shirt today. I
Really? Shut up.
Really? Not kidding you. I'm so
I
freaking
love this shirt.
I love the Goofy movie. Is anybody like not everybody remembers the Goofy movie, which is like ridiculous. I'm like, it's such a good movie.
It's
Like
the
give
best movie.
Goofy a
I
shot.
have a
It's
tattoo, so a
Oh my
Goofy
God.
movie
Wait,
is
of the
the
Goofy movie, I
jam.
have a bunch of tattoos of like this is like the time in the podcast and I'm like, wait a second, after
I
like
know.
that story, all
We
of a sudden
completely derailed,
the
but
time the two Disney fans meet is happening. Literally, I had it and I was like, oh, I really want the Goofy one, but I love Toy Story so much and I just won the Oscar for the best animated film, Toy Story
yes.
4, and I'm like, Toy Story. So
That's awesome.
sorry, not sorry actually, because if you know me, you know I love Disney because it's like my Lilo and Stitch blanket and like my back, like it's everything. It's literally
I feel you. I feel you.
like it's everything. We'll go back to Disney
Yes.
during the podcast, after the podcast, in general. So you were saying,
Yes.
Robin. Hi, Robin. Again, we're back to
Yes.
you.
But so me and Robin we decided we wanted to, we had gone to Tokyo Disney a few times while we were there in Japan. And so we had decided, I had been to California, Disneyland, California. I'd been to Disney World in Florida, obviously Tokyo Disney. And then I had also gone, my husband and I actually went to Paris for our 5th year wedding anniversary. So
Oh,
when we went to Paris, I was like, we're going to Disney.
it's like you better
So
know what's
yes,
happening.
exactly. Like that's not a question. It's happening. So I'd been to Paris Disney as well. So I was like, okay, I'm over here in Japan. I'm not pregnant anymore. And everything that happened with my grandfather, I want to do something that I want to do that I've been dying to do. We just hadn't found the time or I don't know, reason. And so now I was like, I had 2 more places. I needed to go to Shanghai and Hong Kong, and then I'd gone to all of them. So I immediately texted my girlfriend Robin, and I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And so we did it. We did April, we flew to Hong Kong and we went and did Hong Kong Disney. And then literally the next day after that, we jumped on a plane and went to Shanghai, and we were there over my birthday, and it was great. And so we were
Isn't it
able
amazing how like it changes when you love yourself first of all, and when you do something for yourself? I feel like
ex-
that's such an important lesson you're telling us, and a reminder that you're like
it
telling us once
is
again. It changes the moment that you stop and relax and be like, you know what, this is my life. I want to do what makes me happy, and this is what's going to make me happy. Everything else just
a
opens
hundred
up.
percent, 100%. It really does. And you don't, and I think that does, it's not viewed the same way that, in the moment, but like looking back, it's like, I
Yeah,
really needed that.
you really needed
I,
that.
I didn't know that I needed it. I was just very like, I'm not doing anything else right now, and I felt like I needed to do something for me, but I didn't realize what I was doing for my self-esteem and my emotional state and my emotional health and mental health by doing something that I knew I was going to love, and I knew I just needed to have in that moment for myself. And but you're 100% right. It's something that it's and I feel like that's something that isn't talked about either. It's okay to want to be selfish for a little bit. It's
Oh, yes,
okay.
totally. Totally. You got to love yourself and take care of yourself first.
Oh
And I feel
yeah.
like that's something that here with the Always Believer, every single story shares a little bit of that. And
Hmm.
hopefully it'll add up to a lot more like puzzle pieces, but like, and people get that reminder, excuse me, on more of a constant basis because it's something that you're right. We do need to talk about it a lot more.
Oh yeah.
So I love that. So hearing your story right now as a listener, obviously,
Hmm.
I was like, she's loving herself. She's definitely doing something making her happy. And we know the outcome because we've already talked that you already have twins. So we know
Yes.
like everything lines up towards it
Oh
from the
yes.
moment that you're like, Robin, I'm giving you all the shout outs right now, Robin. I'm just loving this. It's like, you must be so proud of Lacey. You're like, yeah, Lacey. Like
She
listening to
she
this,
is
just
by far
like,
one of my biggest fans. I
yeah,
can tell you that right now.
there you go. So we just want to make her happy as well.
Oh yes, oh yes. But yeah, no, that was literally one of the best and most, I mean, beautiful moments I'll always treasure. Um and it was a much needed vacation, breather, whatever you want to call it. It was something I needed in the moment and something that I didn't realize was happening, but it was beautiful. And after that, I felt very rejuvenated and just refreshed. And we took a little bit more time off, probably just a couple more months to kind of really recollect and figure out. We'd honestly, at that point too, we weren't sure if we were going to stay overseas, because our contract being in Japan was starting to come down to an end. And so we weren't sure. We were trying to, figure out, do we want to go to Europe? Do we want to go back to another part of Asia? What do we want to do? And so we were kind of figuring all that out. And then we decided, all right, we are down to the nitty gritty and we're getting ready to leave. If we're going to do another round of IVF, we need to do it and just go for it. So June of 2018, we decided we're going to do it. And we went in, and immediately I got pregnant. And I weirdly enough, when we decided to do the 2, I weirdly enough joked about us having 2, and we just were like, "Oh, it's probably I mean, we haven't had 1, why would 2 work?" Well, here's the rest is
I'm
history.
yeah, I'm catching myself saying the same thing at some point because I also I've gone through some issues, getting pregnant and whatnot. I have
Mhm.
hypothyroidism, like my body's still like adjusting, and a whole bunch of other
Yeah.
things that I've also been open about and want to do
Mhm.
so even more. And it's one of those things as well. It's a mix. Like I'm just gonna end up having two for some reason. I just feel it. It's like kind of like gut feeling of like
Don't
why
cut it
not?
out.
And then
Don't count it out.
every single time I always see twins. I know it's weird to say, but it's one of those like when you see a certain number, when you see a certain thing, you're like something's up in the air. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's just one, it's perfect, obviously, wherever it is. But I understand what you mean. You're like, don't like you never know. They can
No,
come, and even though if it doesn't run in the family or it does, it
you
could
just never
happen.
know. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Exactly.
yeah. No, you don't, and it definitely comes when you least expect it
Yes.
to. But so we found out pretty early that we were having twins, due to just I mean, we had to go in and have multiple ultrasounds and like lab work done, because obviously it's a process. But I also had like a weird surge in like my morning sickness, and it was super strange. And I kind of before we had our ultrasound, I kind of looked at my husband and I was like,
Mm.
I'm more sick than I thought I was going to be. I don't
Is
know.
this
This
a
is weird.
sign? Is this the third
Yeah.
time's the charm, or is this really? I
Yes.
think it's just this doubling up.
Yes, and but sure enough, we get in there and they're, oh, well, there's 2. So we were, okay. So,
It's like,
so, I mean, once we found out there were 2, we completely like our whole lives changed as far as like what we were going to do, and then unfortunately, given the situation too, the boys were supposed to be born in Japan. However, the situation that we were in, the hospital that we were like stationed with and everything didn't have a NICU or anything to support any kind of multiple birth.
oh,
So they were,
interesting.
yeah, it was very strange. So we were just like, okay, what are our options then? And they told us that we had to leave. So we didn't leave very early. It was only like, yeah, I
That's such
know.
a weird statement. Like, what are options? Leave.
Yeah, no, it was like, okay, well, let me just get to packing then. Like, cool. Like we weren't expecting to leave, but all right. But we
That
were
is odd. Okay.
Yeah, but we were supposed to leave in February of 2019, but we left in December. So I mean, it wasn't super,
Okay, it
early.
wasn't
It was
that early.
no.
Exactly.
But with that being said, I was super pregnant, super pregnant.
Well, of course, it's twins.
Yes, and moving across the world. Oh my lord, that was.
Oh, goodness. Just
Ooh,
moving across the world without being pregnant and kids, I've done it
it's a lot.
a lot of times in my lifetime, and it's a lot being pregnant with twins, my goodness.
Oh man,
And
and that
you were
I was. Let's
seven
see. I
months, if I'm not
was. Let me
mistaken,
see. I
or
was 6 months.
six.
6 months.
There
I was 6 months pregnant. I was 6 months pregnant because the boys were born um in February. They were due in March. They were due in March, but they were born in February, so I was 8 months when they were born. But yes, so it's 6 months.
you go. six
So
months. There
yes,
you go. Because I
it.
feel like the birthday was
Let me do some
February.
math real quick.
Before we hop along to
Yeah.
your story of like when you arrived to the States, we're gonna
Yes.
bring I think Robin back.
Oh
We've
yes.
missed her in this conversation because I want to talk about Disney one more time
Yes.
and your pregnancy pictures.
Yes. So we decided, because given the situation and the fact that it was our last hurrah together in Japan, I mean, we've since moved our hurrahs to the US, but our last one for Japan, and being pregnant, I wanted to do something very fun and exciting, because it was such a long time coming, to kind of announce their genders. We announced that we were just pregnant online by just taking a couple pictures outside. But I wanted to do something super fun, and we ended up going to Tokyo Disney for my maternity photos, and she's amazing at taking some pictures, and they're on my Instagram if anybody's interested.
so
But
cute. I love them so much because,
mm,
like, for me, I wanted to circle back to it because it's generally your favorite place in the world,
it is.
obviously.
It is.
Obviously.
Yes.
Like, how can I not say anything else differently than that? And it's that joyous moment of your life saying,
Mhm.
yes, it happened, and they're twins.
And they're twins. And that was the fun thing is I knew I was determined. I was like, I want to do like a gender announcement in Disney because I think it would be just so, I mean, I know people do it all the time, but it was like no one that I really knew had done a lot of that. So I was like, I want to do that. And especially in Tokyo Disney, I mean, it was my last time going. I wanted to just embrace every moment with it. And so we decided to go big or go home. And we did 3 days and I walked my butt off.
See, not only
And
does she move across
oh,
across the world, better said, she goes to Disney
I know
for
how to
3 days.
really know how to push my limits.
It's like Disney's worth it every step of the way.
Every step of the way. Every step. Literal pregnant or not pregnant step. It's
Exactly. It always counts. It's always worth it. I mean,
but it was magical. It was everything I wanted to be and more. It really was,
oh,
and I
it's
loved
just
every
so
bit of
like
it.
it's very heartwarming. Not only because it's Disney, obviously,
Mhm.
we're both Disney nerds, fans, 110%. But
Mhm.
it's heartwarming to see that that you had that moment and you
Yeah.
celebrated. Because I feel like another message that I got from that when I was reading your story is that you celebrated your win.
Yes.
And
And
that's
yes.
super important, not only because you're giving birth to two children, to two people in this world, but also like still, but any win that you have is completely important to celebrate. And I feel like something like that,
100%.
you were like, we're gonna go big and then go home, but we're
And then
first
go
gonna go
home.
big.
And we were ready to go home. I mean,
Yes.
I was ready to ice my feet. Let me tell you. But it was so worth it. And you're 100% right. I think that by giving yourself the opportunity to be happy about something and to take an opportunity to, say, "Oh, I'm going to go do this because I deserve it." I mean, you deserve so much more than you want to give yourself credit for.
Dang
A-
right.
And in so many ways, I've had to learn that the hard way. And I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of us choose that harder road and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's very much a lesson learned, but it is something that I think needs to be recognized a bit more, that it's okay. And it's the same way that, like I was saying earlier, it's okay to be a little selfish sometimes. I mean, as much as you're, in a relationship with somebody or in a friendship or, a family, whatever, you're still very much an individual too. And you still have to take care of your individuality as well. I mean, you have to take care of all your avenues, but at the end of the day, you're with you and you alone, and so I feel like
Preach.
you
I
get you
love that
really have to.
message. And I love that that's what I was saying earlier on when I was introducing you. Like, yeah, of course your TikToks are really cute and creative and funny and oh my goodness gracious. But we also connect on a deeper level because anything that I see from you, you're very real about everything that you've gone through and you're like, no, you got to take care of you first. And this is what, sparks your happiness in order for you
Oh
to move
yes.
forward. And I love that message. So thank you. Thank you
You're
so much.
welcome. Yes, I'm glad. Anything I can honestly do to just, I really want to try to connect it with with other people in general, women obviously who have gone through this similar situation, but just people in general. It's such a overall message I think everybody needs to
Yeah.
understand and embrace more, for sure. Um,
Um, so now we're officially landing
yes, we're officially
to I
landing.
was gonna say Alabama, but not Alabama.
No, so we got our reassignment and we came to Pensacola, Florida. So hence where I am now. But that's where we are. So I came back to Florida full circle.
There you go. Like that was nice 4 years in Japan. Let's go back to where we started. Alrighty
Yep,
then life. Let's do
yep,
this.
yep. That's just how it happened. So
So tell us a
yes.
little bit about what happened with your birth story
Okay.
and the continuation of that, please.
Okay, so we got here. We obviously didn't have a car, we didn't have a house, we didn't have anything. So we were literally starting from ground zero and working our way up. And it was very, very stressful. We immediately jumped into, okay, where are we going to live? What kind of vehicle do we need? Since now we need a vehicle that's going to be able to house all of us, and we just it kind of had to hit the ground running with this. And so once we found places that we were interested in, we immediately started inquiring to buy. And it was January 14th of 2019. We had been in the States for probably just about 2 weeks. And it was my husband's birthday, fun fact. I woke up at this point to, not to get too graphic, but I was going to the bathroom and peeing about every 3 hours at this point. So I immediately was like, okay, I've got to go to the bathroom. And I sit up and I rolled out of bed and I felt a lot of wetness. And I just knew, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to wake up my husband and change the sheets. I've peed on myself. Like, I just knew that that's what had happened. But once I actually stood up, I quickly realized it was not that.
Mm.
And I had actually started bleeding. And I was completely in shock. I woke up my husband and I just tried to be as calm about everything. It was just like, so, honey, I need you to get up. Um,
You need to go to the
we've got a
doctors.
situation.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And we were staying with my mother at the time while we were transitioning into our new home. And so he was like, okay, so let me go get your mom. So, of course, he goes and gets my mom. And side note, my mother is a nurse practitioner by trade. So she came in to the room, not having her medical hat on, completely mother.
Oh goodness.
So she lost it. Because at
Oh,
this point,
mom.
yes, at this point, it was looking like a murder scene. Unfortunately, like, not to get too graphic, but I mean, it was not good.
Yes, and it was yes.
Yeah, so
Oh.
so my mother, I mean, it was so, I felt, God love her, and mom, shout out to you. But I know she just, I mean, it's so hard
It's
to switch that
normal.
hat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's your daughter. And after everything you've gone through, like, of course,
right.
no, of course. We love you, mom. We love you.
Right, right. Yes, exactly. Yes, thank you, and I love you. But no, so literally, so that was that day in and of itself was crazy. But basically, we had to immediately.
Happy
So
birthday to your husband.
yes, yeah, yeah, I know, and that was the worst part. Was
Oh.
I felt so horrible. Not that I
It's
could have
like not that you could
predicted
have
that.
exactly. Like
No,
it's not like you like, let me do this on purpose. No, of
I
course
know,
not. It's just
but
enough. And
but I
shout out to your husband and mine,
I'm
because both are so very patient and loving with
I know,
everything.
and I was like, the last thing you want to do is spend your birthday in a hospital room, but here we are. And so I mean, it was so sad, but I mean, we had
Hmm.
to call an ambulance, and the ambulance came, got me. They rushed behind the ambulance. We got to the hospital. So I had found out I had placental previa, which basically, in the simplest terms I can explain it, which was the simplest terms they could explain it to me, was pretty much because they were di twins, which means they were separate everything. Um, because they are fraternal, they were in separate sacs and separate placentas. So what happened was that, I guess, the placentas, which are fairly large, which I obviously, being a first time mother and everything, I didn't know a whole lot about the anatomy with that, but they're a pretty good size. And so they had kind of almost fused together the membranes of the
Oh
placentas,
wow.
yes, into like a one giant one. So they were still separate, but not. So so it was at
They
this
already wanted
point.
to hang out with each other.
Yes, they were already holding hands before anybody was prepared for it. And so, so at this point, though, the placenta wasn't sitting on top of the like on top of the womb where it was supposed to. It was actually underneath, on top of my cervix. So I had been told that I was more than likely not going to be able to have like a natural birth or anything. It was C-section was pretty much, which, I mean, I had accepted at this point. I wasn't necessarily wanting that, but at the same time, I just wanted everything to go okay. So I wasn't going to argue.
Of course, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, what had happened pretty much from that day, from on January 14th, 2019, is that the one of the babies, we joke about it being Tommy, but one of the babies is
Oh,
pretty much,
Tommy.
I know. And if anybody watches my TikToks or like sees the pictures and stuff, you know who Tommy is.
Yes.
And it's it was more than likely Tommy. He was trying to puncture his way out of there. but pretty much he had like, I don't know, head butted us or what, but it caused a bleed. There was a breach and it caused the bleed. And so they had to quickly obviously stop all that, and they had me stay in the hospital for a couple days, and they told me they were just, I mean, we didn't know, they were really on the fence about taking the boys early because of the situation, but they decided, as long as I'm on bed rest and I don't have another bleed, then I should be fine. So they went on ahead and scheduled me for February 18th of 2019 for the C-section. So they were like, this is our end goal, but if it obviously happens before then, we'll take care of you. So I was like, okay. So that's what we went into. And so that was obviously super scary. I was very stressed. I
Mm.
didn't know what was going to happen. We thought the boys were coming and we just didn't know. And obviously, this is all happening at the same time where we needed a vehicle, needed a house. I mean, it was just like, I was
And
beyond
anything else, life?
like,
Anything else right now?
yes, yes. I was just, I mean, essentially we're carless and homeless and having children at literally any moment. And so I was a wreck to say the least. And so, thankfully, they finally discharged me, and I was able to go back home to my mother's, but they told me I couldn't leave within a 5-mile radius. So I had to stay there. And then obviously they were like, if there's another bleed, you immediately come back, and we're going into an emergency C-section. And so I said, okay. So I was beyond careful at that point because I tried to, I wanted to make the pregnancy last as long and as obviously get them to a healthy weight and everything that they needed to be to where everything would be okay. And thankfully, we made it to that mark. So I was 36 weeks pregnant right at the dot, and they were like, all right, we're taking them. And I was like, take them. So thankfully, everything got to that point. Now, come the day of the actual birth. Everything went smooth in the morning. We got checked in because, like I said, everything was prepared for. So we got in there, everything was ready to go, signed all our paperwork, everything, whatever. They obviously kind of give you the rundown on we don't expect things to happen, but here's what could happen. Um, During the birth itself, I had a very interesting experience. I unfortunately ended up hemorrhaging, and so I lost tons and tons and tons of blood. My blood pressure dropped down to, if I remember correctly, it was like 53 over 15. I mean, it was dramatically low. It was so I completely because if anybody knows anything about a C-section, you're aware of what's going on, but you're obviously very much in like a twilight zone, I would say, and then obviously you have the numbing of the rest of your body, so I was there, but I was kind of like, oh, I just feel really good, but then when my blood pressure started dropping, and they immediately removed the babies out, and Jude was taken to NICU immediately because he was having heart rate drops, and then Tommy was taken straight to nursery. So they were completely separated, and I'm in the operating room, and they had to rush my husband out. They were like, okay, you need to go out, we have to get her stabilized because she's losing a lot of blood. And so he had to go back and tell my family what was going on. And long story short, I ended up going straight to recovery, um, and I had to have 6 blood transfusions, and it was just, I don't miss it. If I'm being quite honest, I don't miss that day at all, which is sad. It's kind of sad because I hear the wonderful stories where women talk about how they loved the giving birth. They absolutely enjoyed every moment of it, even though it was, maybe it was hard or, painful, but they loved it. And I don't miss that day at all.
At all.
No, but it was so, that also, as I said before, where I really had a lot of depression start before even having the boys. Um, Things started to amplify once we moved, mostly because obviously the unpredictability of where we're going to live, where we're going to, what we're going to drive, everything that was happening with that. And then on top of once the bleed happened on January 14th, I really just I was I was such a loss of words for everything at the moment because I didn't know what was going to happen. And so that's where things started to really snowball for me. And then obviously not to mention when the actual birth happened, and I didn't get that whole skin to skin contact. I didn't get to try breastfeeding for a while, and so I kind of missed out on a lot of the bonding experience
Mhm.
that is meant to happen. And so I really went into kind of a shell of myself, and it was it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. Um, and even honestly, it's still hard to talk about a lot of times because I don't really know in a lot of ways to explain it. It's just in the moment I felt very defeated. I didn't, I mean, here I was getting something that I'd always wanted, and we had literally paid for, things that I felt so happy about, but then was nothing was going right, and nothing was happening the way that it was supposed to be happening. But then on top of all that, the guilt started to set in too, because of the infertility. In a lot of ways, I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. Like, why am I feeling like this? I should be happy regardless of the situation. I got what I wanted. Some people, get pregnant right away and have to go through postpartum depression and or postpartum anxiety, and they didn't have to deal with infertility, but I dealt with that and I got what I wanted. So I don't have the right to feel depressed now. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I
Exactly. Yeah, don't totally, totally.
yeah, so it was a strange, like, I don't know, mindset to be in because I didn't really I felt depressed and I felt anxious about a lot of things, but I didn't feel like I had the right to feel that way because of our history. It I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. That's the thing. Like it happens. I mean, not that I've gone through what you've gone through. However, it is a feeling that I feel like as humans that we obviously are, we go through it in our different ways, that we don't
Mm,
allow ourselves to feel certain feelings because we think that
right,
we're so like we're essentially what we're doing, we're comparing ourselves to people who have it quote unquote worse. And it's
right,
something that we shouldn't do. Neither way. We shouldn't compare to ourselves. First of all, period, but we shouldn't compare ourselves
right,
to people who have it quote unquote better than us nor worse than us,
right,
because that's where those thoughts come in. So like I've had that happen. I'm like, why am I feeling this sad, depressed, anxiety? Why do I feel all these negative thoughts when I've been through worse? Where
right.
and that's just my personal, like my whole story is completely different than yours. However, that feeling that you were explaining is totally common in that sense.
I 100% agree. 100%. I think that that is a more universal feeling in a lot of ways. I think obviously for me, it was more for the postpartum. And I do think, and because I feel like I can advocate for a lot of women who obviously go through fertility and infertility moments, and then obviously also with the postpartum depression and anxiety, because it is a bridge that I feel like a lot of people don't think exists, but it really does.
It really, really does.
Hmm.
We're gonna do the following thing with you, my darling, because we have been talking
Yes.
for almost an hour with your very intense and beautiful and wonderful story. And I say wonderful now because you've learned so much and you've grown so much. So I want to invite you again to do another podcast episode so we can talk
Yes.
a little bit more about PVD and more
Yes.
about this
Of
uh
course.
it's not a cause. I can't think. See, after I listen to your story, my brain is numb because it's like it's a roller coaster of a story, like I said earlier. And then I love what we've created here because you're able to come on any platform, and this particular platform in this case, to express these feelings and for more people to be more aware and
Hmm.
feel that's gonna be okay. Because your story is the success story right now. Your boys are, one at this point, all right,
Yes, they
and
are. Ooh.
there's so many other stories that we want to share about them and about your motherhood. So you'll be back. We'll definitely
Yes.
be back and we'll arrange a deer to flyer. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here and being part of it. There are new episodes every single Wednesday, and stay tuned for her for the blog post she's on today and for next time that she'll be on. Probably gonna be big
Bye.
at this point, all right. All right. Send you all my love.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.